everyone, Other Helmet Guy here. And for today's topic, we're taking a serious look at Tien Shinhan, the most disciplined fighter in Dragon Ball, and the one whose true potential is still massively underestimated. When Tien Shinhan was first introduced in Dragon Ball, he stood out as one of the most technically gifted fighters in the series. His strength wasn't just physical, it was rooted in discipline, control, and understanding. Long before meditation became common among the caste, Tien had already mastered it. He demonstrated advanced abilities such as telekinesis, mind-to-mind communication, rapid technique replication, including the Kamehameha, as well as flight, solar flare, and possibly the creation of techniques unique to himself. On top of that, Tien showed a deeper understanding of Ki than most fighters at the time. Alongside him was Chiaotzu, whose focus leaned heavily into psychic and telekinetic abilities. With more development, Chiaotzu had the potential to become one of the most creatively dangerous psychic users in the series. However, much like Yamcha, the transition into Dragon Ball Z and later Super shifted the focus almost entirely toward raw power scaling. As a result, characters like Tien and Chiaotzu, who relied on technique and mastery rather than transformations, were gradually sidelined. It's not just about techniques, it's also about battle IQ. Whenever Tien enters a fight, he doesn't rush in blindly. He studies his opponent, observes their habits, and learns how they think in the middle of combat. If an opponent relies too heavily on the same attacks or techniques, such as repeatedly firing energy blasts like the Kamehameha, Tien adapts quickly. Rather than trying to overpower it, he looks for ways to counter, redirect, or completely shut those attacks down, forcing his opponent to change their approach. When enemies attempt more deceptive tactics, like using the afterimage technique or exploiting blind spots, Tien's third eye gives him a constant awareness of the battlefield. This makes it extremely difficult to surprise him, as he can track movement, sense intent, and react almost instantly. Because of this, opponents can't rely on gimmicks or repetition. They're forced to evolve, experiment, and take risks just to keep up, while Tien continues to adapt in real time. This level of combat awareness is rare, even among stronger fighters, and it highlights why Tien was never just a powerhouse, he was a tactician. When Tien faces opponents like Nappa, the difference in fighting styles becomes immediately clear. Fighters like Nappa rely almost entirely on raw power, reaction speed, and durability, areas where Tien naturally falls behind. These opponents are brawlers first and martial artists second, depending more on instinct and overwhelming force than refined combat skill. Because of their arrogance and higher power levels, they assume they can overpower Tien easily. And in many cases, they do, but not because they're better fighters, only because they hit harder and can absorb more damage. However, when Tien fights on an even playing field, the outcome changes. In one of the Dragon Ball movies, when Tien faces Trunks while Trunks remains in his base form and their power levels are closer, Trunks struggles significantly. His lack of martial arts experience and technical depth becomes obvious, forcing him to rely on transformation rather than skill to secure the win. This shows that when opponents can't rely on transformations or massive power gaps, Tien becomes far more difficult to defeat. His discipline, technique, and combat awareness begin to outweigh raw strength. Now, when it comes to Vegeta, this is where things become more nuanced. Vegeta does have good battle IQ, but not a high one. He relies heavily on ki blasts, raw power, and transformations to dominate his opponents, rather than developing a wide range of refined techniques or traditional martial arts mastery. If Vegeta were forced to fight Tien on equal ground, with no transformations and no power advantage, he would have a much harder time than most people expect. While Vegeta can observe and react mid-fight, he ultimately relies more on instinct and force than on learning multiple strategies or adapting through technique. Against a fighter like Tien, whose entire strength is built on discipline, precision, and adaptability, that reliance on power becomes a weakness rather than an advantage. That's also why characters like Yamcha were important rivals for Tien. Their fights weren't decided by power levels, but by strategy, martial arts skill, and technique. With more time and development, that rivalry could have pushed both characters to grow far beyond what the series ultimately allowed. One of the main reasons Tien eventually hit a ceiling is because of where, and how, he trained. Earth, by itself, simply isn't an optimal environment for continued growth at higher levels. And when you look at why fighters like Goku and Vegeta became as powerful as they did, the pattern is clear: they didn't stay on Earth. Goku trained under multiple gods, learned in Otherworld, and traveled across the universe. Vegeta followed a similar path, pushing himself beyond Earth's limits through extreme training and later divine instruction. Their growth didn't come from talent alone, it came from exposure to entirely different systems of power. Now here's where Tien's potential becomes genuinely terrifying. What if Tien had received training from different parts of the universe? What if he trained in Otherworld, learned directly from the Supreme Kai, or encountered alien races whose abilities focused on technique, control, and precision rather than raw power? Tien is the type of fighter who doesn't just imitate, he understands. If exposed to alien abilities or divine techniques, he wouldn't just copy them. He would refine them, adapt them, and develop entirely new applications. We've already seen something similar with Goku on planet Yardrat, where he learned instant transmission. Goku learned the technique, but he never fully explored everything that planet had to offer. If Tien had gone instead, it's likely he wouldn't have stopped at one technique. He would have mastered it and then continued learning, expanding his skill set far beyond simple teleportation. From there, the possibilities become endless. Tien could have developed techniques designed specifically to counter transformations, temporarily suppressing power spikes, disrupting ki control, or limiting an opponent's ability to rely on brute force. And that's what makes Tien's unrealized potential so dangerous. With the right training environment and exposure to other worlds, he wouldn't need to overpower his enemies, he could dismantle them. Not through raw strength, but through mastery. And it's not just Tien, Chiaotzu is another character whose potential was never fully realized. One of Chiaotzu's biggest mistakes was trying to follow the same fighting path as everyone else. Instead of fully embracing his psychic and telekinetic strengths, he often tried to fight physically, attempting to prove himself in ways that didn't suit his natural abilities. That approach held him back. Chiaotzu was never meant to be a frontline brawler. His true strength lies in control, manipulation, and mental warfare. If Chiaotzu had focused entirely on his psychic potential, the possibilities become far more interesting. For example, learning techniques similar to Goldo's time-stopping ability would have been a natural evolution of his skill set. On top of that, Chiaotzu already showed an understanding of magic, something very few fighters in Dragon Ball ever explore seriously. Rather than fighting like a warrior, Chiaotzu was closer to a sage, someone who could control the battlefield without needing overwhelming power. With enough time and proper guidance, Chiaotzu could have combined psychic abilities, magic, and creativity to develop techniques that were subtle, unpredictable, and incredibly lethal. That's what makes his unused potential so frustrating, not because he lacked power, but because he was never allowed to grow into what he was truly meant to be. Dragon Ball has always rewarded raw power, but characters like Tien and Chiaotzu prove that mastery, discipline, and creativity matter just as much. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, and once again, thanks for watching.